My name's Damian Cross. People in this city call me a lot of things: occultist, freak, lunatic. Some whisper detective, others prefer devil's errand boy. But when the lights go out, when the air turns cold and something starts whispering your name from the shadows, you call me. Not because you like me, not because you trust me, but because you're desperate, and desperation has no pride. I don't wear a badge. I don't carry a Bible. I'm not some holy knight chosen by heaven to fight the armies of hell. Hell, I don't even believe in heaven anymore. I believe in survival. And every day I survive is another day I cheat, the demons clawing for my soul. You see, I've been marked, cursed. I didn't ask for it, but life doesn't take requests. I see things most people can't, things they shouldn't. The veil that separates our world from theirs. For me, it's paper thin. Sometimes it rips wide open, and I'm the poor bastard who has to sew it shut. It's most nights I try to drink enough whiskey or smoke enough cigarettes to forget that. Doesn't work. The nightmares come anyway, but sometimes the nightmares call me first. It always starts the same way. A phone rings in the middle of the night. A trembling voice on the other end. A family who doesn't know who else to turn to. They've already tried doctors, priests, therapists. None of them worked. By the time they find me, it's already too late for comfort. That's how it was that night. Rain hammered against my office window, neon signs bleeding through the glass. The city outside was a blurred mess of light and shadow. I was sitting at my desk, cigarette burning low, staring at a lighter I keep close. Brass tarnished, with a small cross engraved on its side. It was given to me by someone who thought I could still be saved. They were wrong, but I still keep it, maybe as a reminder, maybe as a warning. The phone rang. On the line, a woman's voice cracked with panic. Her son was sick. Not flu, not fever, no hospital could help him. He spoke in voices that weren't his own. He scratched strange marks into the walls at night, symbols no one in her family understood. Worst of all, he told her he was waiting for someone. He was waiting for me. Now, I don't put much stock in coincidence. If a demon's calling me out by name through some poor kid, I take it seriously, even if I'd rather pretend it isn't happening. So I grabbed my coat, tossed the lighter in my pocket, and picked up the duffel bag I keep by the door. Holy water, chalk, salt, knives. A few charms I stole from a dead priest. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep me alive. Locked up my office and stepped out into the storm. The streets were nearly empty. Just a few drunks stumbling out of bars and taxis slicing through puddles. The city always looks different in the rain, like it's hiding its scars beneath a silver veil. But no matter how much water falls from the sky, the filth underneath never washes away. The boys' apartment wasn't far. A rundown block on the east side, where neon lights die early and shadows crawl freely. The kind of place landlords forget about until the building burns down. Perfect breeding ground for the things I hunt. As I climbed the stairwell, I could feel it before I even reached the door. The air was heavy, sour. The kind of weight that makes your chest tighten, like you've been buried alive. Every step felt slower, like the building itself was resisting me. When I knocked, the mother answered. Her eyes were hollow, her face pale, the face of someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Behind her, I heard the boys' screams. That was the moment I knew. This night was going to leave a scar. This is Storywise. Stories that pull you in. Worlds that won't let you go. The woman's name was Clara. She clutched her bathrobe like it was the only thing keeping her together. Eyes darting over my shoulder as though she expected something to crawl up behind me. The fear wasn't just in her face. It was in the apartment itself. The lights flickered, even though the storm outside hadn't cut the power. The wallpaper peeled in jagged strips that looked less like wear and more like claw marks. And the air. The air carried that copper temps I've come to know too well. Blood and sulfur. She stepped aside without a word, like she knew why I was there. Like she'd been waiting for me. I walked in, the duffel bag heavy against my side. The carpet was soaked in old stains, but fresh ones too. Water from the ceiling dripped steadily into a bucket, clinking like a metronome counting down. Every sound in that apartment seemed amplified. The ticking clock on the wall, the hum of the fridge, Clara's nervous breaths. And then, cutting through it all, came the boy's voice. High, shrill, but not his own. It rose from the bedroom at the end of the hallway, curling around the walls like smoke. He's here. The voice crooned, guttural and broken, like two people speaking in unison. He's come for me. Clara shuddered. I didn't move. When you do this kind of work long enough, you learn one thing. Demons love theatrics. They love to put on a show, to frighten you before the fight even begins. It's how they win, because most men run screaming before they've even seen the worst of it. I don't run. Not anymore. I looked at Clara, her hands trembling on the edge of her robe. Stay out here, I said quietly. Whatever you hear, don't come in. She nodded once, lips trembling, eyes shining with the kind of tears that never fall. I walked down the hall. The boys' door was closed, but not locked. When I touched the handle, the metal burned cold against my skin, like ice in the middle of summer. I pushed it open. The smell hit me first. Stale sweat, rot, and something foul like burned hair. The blinds were drawn, but the shadows didn't belong to the room. They moved wrong, slithering against the walls, twisting into shapes I didn't recognize. And there he was. The boy couldn't have been older than 12. He sat hunched on the bed, sheets tangled around him, his skin clammy and pale under the flickering light bulb. His lips were cracked, bleeding. His fingernails were black, sharpened from scratching at the walls, and his eyes, God, his eyes. One moment they were wide and brown, the next they rolled back into his skull, showing nothing but milky white. When he spoke, his voice wasn't his own. Damian Cross, the demon, hissed through his teeth. The cursed one, it's the thief of fire. We've been waiting for you. I didn't flinch. I just set the duffel bag on the floor and started unpacking. Salt, chalk, a flask of holy water, a dagger with a hilt wrapped in rosary beads. And my lighter. The boy's lips curled into a smile that didn't belong on a child. You're too late, it said. He is almost here. The heir is coming, and when he rises, your name will burn with the rest. I crouched on the floor, tracing a circle with chalk. My voice was steady, though my hands knew the truth. I was already shaking. Funny, I muttered, striking the chalk harder against the wood. Every demon I've ever sent back says the same thing. And yet here we are, world still turning. The boy laughed, a shrill, jagged sound that rattled the window glass. The circle finished. I stood and faced him fully. You want a show? I whispered. Let's start. I uncapped the flask and flicked drops of holy water across the room. Steam hissed where it landed on the boy's skin. He shrieked, body arching unnaturally, bones popping in his shoulders like dry wood cracking in a fire. His eyes shot open, glowing faintly red. I pulled the lighter from my pocket, flicked it open. The flame bloomed, small but steady, casting a glow over the chalk circle. The cross engraved on the side glinted, and for a moment I felt something, a warmth, maybe, a memory of the person who gave it to me. I spoke the words I've spoken 100 times before, words that feel like gravel in my throat. The language of angels, the language demons hate. The room erupted. The bulb overhead exploded, plunging us into darkness except for the glow of the lighter. Shadows clawed at the walls, writhing like living things. The boy levitated, sheets tearing free and twisting like ropes around him. His mouth opened wide, far too wide, jaw stretching until it cracked. The voice that came out wasn't his anymore. Can't stop it. The sound shook the floorboards, rattled the walls. I gritted my teeth and pressed on, reciting the words, each syllable cutting through the air like broken glass. The lighter flame flickered, nearly dying, but I clenched it tighter, holding it steady. The boy's body convulsed, then slammed back onto the bed. Black smoke poured from his mouth, thick and choking, twisting toward the ceiling. The shadows writhed, shrieking in voices I couldn't count. But then slowly the smoke thinned, the voices faded, and finally the boy went still. I lowered the lighter. The room was silent again, except for the sound of the boy's ragged breathing. He was alive, human again. I should have left it at that, but I never leave a scene without answers. That's when I saw them. Carved into the boy's forearms were markings, sigils, deep, deliberate, and far older than anything I'd seen in years. Not the work of a demon, not even the work of some two-bit cult. This was something else, something ancient. I sketched them quickly in my notebook, even as the boy stirred, whispering in his sleep. One phrase repeated, soft, broken. The heir is coming. The heir is coming. I snapped the notebook shut and stuffed it back into my coat. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. not by a long shot. And somehow, I knew. The real nightmare was just beginning. The room was quiet again, but it wasn't peace. Never is. Exorcisms don't end clean. You can drive out the parasite, you can stitch the wound, but the scar remains. The scars have a way of reopening when you least expect it. I closed the flask, slipped the dagger back into my bag, and stood there for a long moment, staring at the boy. His chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. Sweat clung to his forehead. His lips twitched, murmuring words I couldn't quite make out. I've seen 100 cases like his. Some kids recover, most don't. You can't unsee what the darkness does to you. You can't scrape it out of your skin, no matter how deep you claw. As I turned to leave, I felt it. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. Presence. Not the demon-eyed scent that bastard back where it came from. This was different. Watching, waiting, like something just beyond the veil had its eyes locked on me. I flicked the lighter, watching the tiny flame flicker. Sometimes that little fire is the only thing that reminds me I'm still here, still human, still mine. The feeling didn't fade. Whatever had left those sigils on the boy wasn't gone. It was biding its time. I slipped the lighter back into my pocket, grabbed the duffel, and walked out. The hallway was darker than before, like the light bulbs had dimmed since I'd gone in. Clara shot to her feet the second she saw me. "Is he?" She started, words trembling. "He'll sleep," I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant. "For now, he's safe." Her face broke. Relief, grief, exhaustion all at once. She covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling between her fingers. But I didn't stay, couldn't. Every second in that apartment made me feel like I was sinking deeper into quicksand. I brushed past her, muttering, "Don't let him near mirrors for a few days. And throw out every cross in your house. They won't help." Her breath hitched. But the priest said. I stopped halfway down the hall and glanced back at her. "Lady, priests aren't the ones who bleed when things go wrong. Trust me." And then I opened the door. Rain poured down outside, hissing against the cracked pavement. I pulled my coat tighter around me, lit another cigarette, and stepped onto the landing. That's when I heard it, a click. The unmistakable sound of a gun's safety being thumbed off. Damian Cross. Her voice was sharp, controlled, and all too familiar. Detective Reyes. She stood under the awning at the bottom of the stairs, hand resting on the grip of her sidearm, dark hair plastered against her cheeks from the rain. 2 uniforms flanked her, but their eyes didn't hold the same fire hers did. They looked nervous. They always did when I was around. Reyes didn't look nervous. She looked like a wolf about to sink her teeth in. I exhaled smoke and leaned on the railing. "Evening, detective?" "Cut the crap," she said. "What did you do to that kid?" I shrugged. "Saved him." She narrowed her eyes. "That what you call it? 'Cause from where I stand, every time your name shows up, people end up dead, insane, or worse. You think I don't keep track? Obsessed with me, huh?" I smirked, tapping ash into the rain. "I'm flattered." Her jaw tightened. "One of these days, Cross, I'm going to find out what you really are. And when I do..." She let the threat hang in the air, unfinished, but sharp enough to cut. I flicked the cigarette into the puddles below and started down the steps. "Careful, detective. Curiosity kills more than cats." She stepped into my path, chin raised, eyes blazing. "What were you doing in there?" she pressed. I leaned in close enough for her to smell the smoke on my breath, close enough to see the rain dripping down her cheek like tears. "You already know," I whispered. And with that, I pushed past her. The uniforms shifted awkwardly as I passed, like they weren't sure whether to stop me or just let the devil walk free. I didn't look back. Behind me, Reyes' voice carried into the storm. "You can't keep doing this, Cross. One day, you're gonna slip. And when you do, I'll be there." I stopped at the curb, turned my collar up against the rain, and let out a low laugh. "Get in line," I muttered, because if she thought she was the only one waiting for me to fall, she hadn't been listening. The city was still bleeding rain by the time I got downtown. Midnight in Arcadia always smells the same wet asphalt, exhaust fumes, a faint stench of rot rising from the sewer grates. It's the kind of perfume that never washes out of your clothes, no matter how many times you scrub. I kept my head down, cigarette glowing between my lips, and ducked into a side street where the street lamps burned a little dimmer. Like even the city wanted to forget it existed. At the end of the alley, half buried between a pawn shop and a boarded-up laundromat, sat a door painted in peeling black. Above it, the sign read, Sibylline Books. The letters were faded, but the gold paint still caught the occasional flicker of neon from the pawn shop across the street. I pushed the door open. The bell above the frame gave a tired jingle, and the smell of old paper wrapped around me like incense. Warm, dusty, filled with secrets. A single lamp burned at the front desk, casting long shadows through the labyrinth of shelves. Every inch of wall was stacked with books, scrolls, scraps of parchment so ancient they looked ready to crumble at the touch. And behind the counter sat Maya. She looked up from her book the moment I stepped in, her eyes sharp, dark, and too knowing studied me like I was just another riddle on her shelf. Her black hair was pulled into a messy braid and her thin fingers were stained with ink. Well, she said, closing the book with a soft thud, if it isn't the city's favorite lost soul? I smirked, pulling the lighter from my pocket and flicking it open, then closed, then open again. Miss me, she rolled her eyes. I miss silence. You never bring anything but trouble. Trouble's all I've got, I said, tossing my soaked duffel onto the counter. Her gaze dropped to it, then to me. You did another one, kid, I confirmed. 12 shouldn't have lived through it, but he did. Something flickered in her eyes' relief, maybe, or just curiosity. Maya wasn't the sentimental type. She leaned forward, lowering her voice, and I pulled my notebook from my coat and flipped it open to the sketches. The sigils glared up from the page, black lines twisted into circles and jagged curves, shapes that looked like they wanted to move when you weren't looking. Her breath caught. She didn't hide it well enough. You've seen them before, I said flatly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slid her glasses higher on her nose and traced one sigil with her fingertip, careful not to touch the page directly, like the ink itself might burn her. These, she whispered, these aren't possession marks, Damian. They're not wards either. They're older. Much older. Old. Her eyes flicked up to mine, and for the first time tonight, I saw something I didn't see often in Maya. Fear. Pre-Abrahamic, she said softly. Before angels. Before demons. Before any god we know how to name. The room seemed to shrink around us, the lamp's light dimming, the air heavier. Cute bedtime story, I muttered, though my throat was tight. What do they mean? She hesitated, then turned and climbed the ladder behind the counter, fingers flying across spines until she pulled free a massive tome. She laid it on the counter with a grunt. The leather binding was cracked, etched with symbols I half recognized, half wished I didn't. She flipped through the pages, parchment whispering, until she stopped on an illustration that looked almost identical to my sketch. There, she said, pointing. The drawing showed a circle carved with jagged lines, crowned with strange script. Beneath it in Latin was scrawled a single phrase, Sigillum Heredis, the seal of the air, she translated. I felt my stomach sink. The kid said that. Over and over. The air is coming. Maya closed the book, the sound echoing like a door slamming shut. Damian, this isn't just some random demon using a body as a puppet. This is a herald, a messenger. And if it's carving those seals, she trailed off. Then what I pressed. Her eyes darkened. Then something's waking up. Silence stretched between us, heavy as stone. Finally, I flicked the lighter, letting the flame burn just long enough to feel its heat. If something's waking up, I muttered, then I'll put it back to sleep. Maya's expression softened pity, maybe, or just the kind of sorrow you feel when you know someone's already lost and Dos and T realize it yet. You can't fight what you don't understand, Damian, she said gently. And you don't understand this. Not yet. I shoved the notebook back into my coat, grabbed the duffel, and headed for the door. Her voice followed me, soft, almost pleading. Be careful. If the air is truly coming, even you won't walk away from it. I paused in the doorway, cigarette between my lips, rain dripping off my coat. I didn't look back when I answered. Story of my life. And then I stepped into the storm again. The rain never let up that night. I walked 4 blocks, aimless, letting the storm soak me to the bone. Sometimes I wonder if I do it on purpose, punish myself for surviving when so many don't. Let the city, filth wash over me until I can tell if it's rain or blood running down my coat. My lighter was my only anchor. Flick, flame out. Flick, flame out. Each spark a heartbeat, each flame a reminder that I still had some fight left. But Maya's words chewed at me the whole way. The heir is coming. I'd heard a lot of NW world prophecies in my line of work. Every cult, every broken soul screaming about raptures and resurrections. 99% of them were smoke. But these sigils weren't just warnings. They were invitations. Something wasn't just coming in. It was being welcomed. And the city was already rolling out the red carpet. By the time I cut across the industrial district, it was nearly 2 in the morning. Most factories were shuttered, their smokestacks dead. But one building was alive with light steel. Glass, too clean for this part of town. I stopped across the street, pulling the cigarette from my mouth, staring up at the glowing sign affixed to the top of the tower. Eterna Corporation. The logo pulsed with neon blue, humming faintly against the storm. I'd heard whispers about them before. A biotech company, supposedly. Private contracts, military ties, government funding. The kind of suits who bought senators like poker chips and buried their secrets 10 stories deep. But standing there, rain dripping into my eyes, I felt it the same crawling pressure I'd felt in that boys' room, a weight pressing down on my lungs. The darkness wasn't hiding in shadows anymore. It was wearing a badge. It had an office, a logo. And something told me Eterna wasn't just another corporation. They were pulling strings. Strings tied to demons, rituals, sigils. Strings tied to the air. I lit the cigarette with shaking fingers, watching the tower breathe neon against the clouds. They always say the devil wears a suit, I muttered. Guess they were right. As I turned and disappeared into the storm, my thoughts tightened around a single truth. If Eterna was involved, then every soul in this city was already on the line. And maybe, just maybe, the only thing standing between them and the darkness was a half-broken bastard named Damian Cross. But here's the thing about darkness. It doesn't fight fair. It waits. It whispers. It watches. And it never, ever loses interest. The lighter clicked open one last time, a flame trembling in the wind. My name is Damian Cross. I whispered into the night, and this is just the beginning.